Oh boy, this is it. The moment you all have finally been waiting for. I've already gave my good stuff about season 2 of what episodes I really loved and really liked. And now, everybody wants to hear what is my most hated and disliked god-awful Loud House episodes from season 2. Let's begin this. And by the way, all of you probably know what the 2 worst episodes are, but the question is, which one of them is going to be number 1 on this hated list?
Like fire, hellfire.
No laughing matter. This is going to be hard for me to say, but in looking back at this episode again after when I first reviewed it, I realized how blindly stupid I was to realize an episode like this really ruined Luann's character. And there's a good damn reason why I put this at number 7 on the bottom of this list. I like Luann Loud, but I just don't like how she was portrayed in this episode. As bad as how I hated how they freaking handled her in the taunting hour. This episode is like telling us that she can't take criticism, when really, this is coming from the girl who's telling a lot of bad puns ever since Left in the Dark, and yet she still continues to do them from one episode to another, until they decided to hurt her with this episode. I felt like this is an episode that's about hating the critics. In other words, Luann's siblings. It just felt like so much the writers were feeling more insecure. It's like they're telling us the message that if you criticize somebody, you're an asshole. I mean, is me hating the episode on thin ice or hating movies like the Garfield live action movie or the Ugly Dolls movie is a bad thing? Is that what this episode is trying to tell me? If that's what it is, you're pretty stupid. I will say, critics aren't the bad guys. Well, depending on who's got bitter taste in everything. But there were a few good things I actually really enjoyed, especially with Lenny hugging Luann. I think I actually would feel more cringeworthy and annoyed from this episode than the taunting hour, especially when it's on Luann Loud. There was possibilities that there was no reason for this episode to even exist, especially when she gets better in the next season.
Like fire, hellfire.
Making the grade. So this episode did have a couple of mixed reviews. Until then, the scale went down to negative, and clearly there's a reason why. This is possibly an episode that you could either hate Lincoln or hate Lisa. Because Lincoln, he can't even please both his class or his sisters, and even at the point where he wanted Lisa to act average, but somewhat Lisa didn't have to completely change. And it's pretty much a shameful about why they try to show this of being over the top, and it gives my other issue. If Lisa didn't go so much over the top, this would have been great. And if I didn't know any better, I say Lisa was the one who acted more like a stick in the mud in the very beginning to make everybody turn against Lincoln. And yet everybody in the family decides that they should ask Lisa for help. I mean, are the adults not even that smart enough to know how to cook or know their knowledge of wisdom? Was everybody completely brainless in this episode? I don't know about you, but somehow I didn't go back to watching this episode again. And ironically, this was the actual first episode where Vampire Fan actually made his debut in one of my reviews.
Like fire, hellfire.
Change of heart. Good fucking almighty. I hated this one when it comes to Clyde and when it comes to Lori. Turns out in the very beginning, Lori's getting extremely pissed off with Clyde, nose bleeding over her shoe every time he fawns over her. And suddenly Clyde actually asks Lenny's help, which I think were some kind of cute moments, but they're not enough to actually be a good episode, especially when it comes to Clyde not learning any fucking lesson of what he was taught throughout the entire episode. An entire ending, he acts like a over-love struck freak again. Lori in this episode was no better either. After knowing that Lenny and Clyde were actually spending so much time together, Lori kind of misses Clyde. But why? Don't you already have a boyfriend? His name is Bobby. Unless you don't really love him. Lenny may have been the saving grace for this episode, but this episode is cringe and not straightforward throughout. And nobody didn't learn anything throughout this episode. And there was no reason this episode shouldn't even exist.
Like fire, hellfire.
The Fantastic Voyage. What the absolute fuck were y'all thinking? So Vanzilla breaks down, and it turns out the Loud family actually needs a new vehicle, and so they actually bought one, and they call it Veronica. But here's the pain in the ball stabbing happens. Lynn Sr. acts like a complete weirdo and an asshole to his family about being so much overprotective with Veronica. And yet he gets a taste of his own medicine, and they decide to go get Vanzilla back. Fuck that, y'all should have kept the new Van instead of that piece of shit. Could have been more gentle-like with them. There were some laughs I got out of it, and there were a couple of things that I did kind of cringe at, especially with Rita and that bare-chested guy that she was hanging around with, thinking that she could try to make Lynn jealous, when really, I think she was trying to cheat on him. And I just love the reaction she does.
You can put your shirt back on now, Brandon.
There was a lot of hating on Lynn Sr. that I just despise of him in this episode. That makes him such a terrible father figure. By the way, was there any good reason that Rita could have actually got her own vehicle instead of riding in the van all the fucking time? And if that's so, I hope Lenny gets her own vehicle in the future. Because an episode like this, it deserves to be eviscerated.
Like fire, hellfire.
Not allowed. Okay, so there was a whole lot of bullshit theory thinking that Lincoln was actually adopted. If anyone was adopted, I'd say Lucy is. Because has it ever occurred to anybody that nobody ever talks about Grandma Harriet in the family besides her? And if that's so, wouldn't the Louds have two grandmothers? But I'll get back on the subject another time sooner. Anyway, this episode turns out that Lincoln is trying to find someone's his birth story because he has to present it in school. And it turns out he can't even find a fucking damn clue about what day he was born, when he was delivered. It kind of just drags on with all these fucking field tests, and Clyde was not even needed for this episode. Lincoln could have actually discovered this by himself, and it turned out in the very end that he was delivered by the president. What the actual fuck? Why was the president actually helping them? Are the writers even aware that the president does not want to see him right out in the public eye, like he's always hiding himself in the limousine? They wouldn't stop for anybody, not even for pregnancy. I felt like a bunch of teenagers actually wrote this episode. Because from the looks of the episode, it feels like it is written by that type of group. But it doesn't even help us explain about his white hair. And this would be an episode I wouldn't even show to a dying kid if they wanted to watch The Loud House.
Like fire, hellfire.
Now this was a hard decision for me to even figure out what was going to be number 2 and what was going to be number 1 on my worst second season Loud House episode of all time. So I went back and took a look at some of my episode reviews on these two. And much likely, both these episodes nearly destroyed the Loud House, its reputation, and the fan base as well, too. Especially when it's both episodes with Lincoln's family that did come off so heavily dysfunctional toward Lincoln. It's like they don't even love him at all. So I took a look at my views, I took a look at the comments, and the one that gets second place is Brawl in the Family. Who could have fucking seen this one coming? You would have to be completely thick in the head to think that this was actually a good episode. But seeing how this one got 532 comments and 31K views, can't go wrong with so much the hate the episodes are getting. Especially when this episode happened to do with Lori and Lenny that they're fighting over one thing. A fucking dress. I mean, really? Since when did Lori and Lenny actually have a fight over a fucking dress? That'd be an 8-year-old being angry at a video game. Long story short, I did not like how Lori and Lenny were portrayed in this episode. I hated how the parents were pretty completely useless, and the Sister Fight protocol was total BS. And as for Lincoln, everybody might disagree with me when I say this. I will say that Lincoln tried to do his best to try to help his sisters out, but here's where the downfall problem that this character is. When Lincoln heard about the huge fight between Lori and Lenny's little BS shit, the sisters talked him out of it because this was a sister problem, but naturally he tried to figure something out. And he only made it worse, and eventually the remaining sisters start picking petty fights, which is so much shitty of them. And even the ending didn't even help so much either. All the girls simply needed Lincoln to leave so that they could have some time to cool off. Fuck you. Then again, I could actually live with that, but here's the problem where it happened. With what went on at this time, Lincoln apparently didn't learn shit from this one earlier, and yet he ignites another fight again. I mean, come on, what the fuck? Lincoln is not a complete idiot like Lenny. I mean, sure, he may not know anything about the girls, and you know, apparently, sometimes I don't. But the point is, Lincoln is not a complete twit. I despise every minute of this episode. From Lori and Lenny to the parents being completely useless and the Sister Fight protocol. Since when has that become a thing in the Loud House? If I was this episode being close to an elephant's penis, I wouldn't be too worried about getting pissed on. Number one, you all fucking guessed it clearly. No such fucking luck.
God damn.
This episode. I cannot believe with a total of 32K views and 971 comments on my review of that episode, there was so much hate that was delivered to this episode when I reviewed it. Especially when I started reviewing this episode, I screamed and blew the mic out completely. No joke. This is one of the episodes that are just beyond child neglect and abuse. I don't know how to get through this one because apparently you all have commented your hate toward the episode. I don't know where to begin with this episode. It's just agonizing my head, my throat, my lungs. Every part of my body is feeling the agonizing with this episode that I watched. Mostly everybody was totally unlikable except Clyde, who wasn't enough to save this episode. So Lincoln is trying to get out of all these sister activities by pretending he's being bad luck. And it turned out, to the family's eyes, he was bad luck. And what did they do? They let him stay at home. The next couple of days, they make him sleep outside. Bullshit, I cannot believe y'all actually did that to your own kid. And when Lynn actually wins a game of the baseball, Rita said that they sell all this furniture. What the fuck? Was this merely an episode for us to hate Lincoln? Because much likely, I think this was an episode for us to much hate his family. I would never fucking show this to a kid who's actually been through this kind of abuse before. Look, Chris, we all know you made some really good episodes, and some of them were shit too. But really, did you have to go over hate it with this episode? Were you actually this way as a kid? If so, what kind of example would you set for the younger audience that would actually watch this episode? This episode, along with Fellas for Love, were the reason why people stopped watching the show. But I'd say this one actually fucking much did it all. And if you're asking for me to revisit this episode, fucking forget about it. This was an episode that almost nearly made me slip my wrists. I'm telling you, this is an episode that has to be skipped over. Okay. So, this has clearly been my 7 most hated episodes from season 2. And I can't wait to do my season 4 episodes. Let me know in the comment section which episode did you really most likely hate from season 2. Till then, I'll see y'all next time. Right now, I gotta get some ice for my head.